welcome everybody to the Seven Exits podcast. I am Stephanie Singleton, and I'm here with our favorite empowerment psychologist, Dr. Rosenna Bakari, as always. And how are you today?
Oh, I am doing so good, so empowered, and excited to help others find their sense of empowerment too.
Awesome. I'm loving this hair. I'm really, I am loving this whole look.
Thank you. It's called my airline hairdo. It's what you wear when you just get off the plane. And you have to make things work.
Yeah, hey, you got to do what you got to do, but it looks like you have it down to a fine science. That's great. Listen, everybody, before we get started, please hit that like button and share and let people know that, yep, 7 Exit Podcast is here again. And this is going to be a good one because I know a lot of us are really in this situation when nothing is going your way. Oh my God. Who is out there that's like, oh my God, I'm trying so hard. I'm doing everything right. And I just have this season of nothing going my way. Okay. What do you do when all the doors seem slammed shut and life seems to be working against you? And you're like, God, are you there? Hello? Do you see me? Like, what is happening? And so I just really want to be clear, right, Dr. Rosenna, you're not talking about just having a bad day or even having a bad week, right?
No, I'm not talking about having a bad day. You can look at any podcast and figure out how to get through a bad day because we all have those. And then there are times, though, I have certainly had them. I know, Dr. Singleton, that you've had them too, where life itself seems to be just trying to stomp you down to the ground. So I'm talking about a season of life challenges where it's not necessarily one thing that goes wrong, but it's more than one. It's 2, 3, 4 significant things that go wrong right after another. And so when that happens, it really shakes the foundation of our belief system and our sense of worthiness and even our spirituality and our relationship with God. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, and who out there hasn't had a season or may not be in one right now? Okay. I can just say I remember we were talking about this earlier before we came on. I remember this period of time. Oh my God, my aunt was very sick. We didn't know what she was sick with. She wound up with liver cancer. She wound up dying, and sometimes death brings out the worst in family.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, after she passed, it was just chaos. It was contention. A lot of us did not like each other after that and did not speak to each other for years. I'm not talking about a couple of months, a couple of weeks. I mean, I'm talking about a decade, right? Or more after that. So that happened, right? And then right after that, I wound up having to get like 2 surgeries, and they found something in my breast after that. Then it seemed like I was always having some type of financial issue, trying to make ends meet. And it was just one thing after the other. And I was just like, I went on road, right? Just like a zombie, right? Because I was just so taught, you just gotta press on. Press on. Like, don't stop to even think about what's really happening. You just got to get through it. You just got to keep straight ahead. And I'm going to be real honest. I think if I know, I don't think, if I had not had my daughter and my brother to have to take care of at that time, who were younger, yeah, I don't even want to talk about where I would have went with that, right? But I stayed on that road, and even now I can see how in certain situations, like that's the default to go into road, like, okay, I just got to keep my head down. That's another popular saying. People used to say, you just got to grin and bear it, or you just got to keep your head down, or you just got to keep blinders on and just plow through, right? I don't know how much good that plowing, I don't know. I don't know how much that plowing did for me. You know what you know what I'm saying? Because it was almost like an out-of-body experience. It's like, okay, I'm gonna put you over here and not deal with all the bells and the whistles, or even my own imagination and creativity to figure out another way to go through this, right? I'm just gonna put you here and boom, I'm just gonna plow straight ahead. Yeah, that's awful. I mean, that's not the only time that, but it was just awful.
Okay. Mine was similar. Mine started with grief. So that part was similar in my life, where I lost my brother, my closest brother to me. And it was pure trauma. He was 44. I was 42 at the time. He died from lupus. And when I tell you that my spirit jumped in that grave with him when we buried him, it was trauma. And like you say, you just numb out and go on road and keep going through. And just when I was about to come out of it, I got a phone call that said my godson was in an accident and died. Just when it was 3 days before what would have been the 1-year anniversary of my brother's death. And it just was horrific. And just as we were preparing to bury him, shortly after that, my sister's husband was told he had pancreatic cancer. So we spent the next 15 months preparing, trying to nurture and pray and hope and prepare at the same time for his passing. And so he did pass 15 months later. Like you say, death has a way of bringing out other stuff, unhealed stuff, triggering unhealed stuff in you and your family, in your systems of belief. And so at the same time, because of my brother's passing, it shifted all of my family relationships. And so then my unaddressed wounds from childhood trauma just flared up, where there was no hiding place, nowhere constructive for this energy to go. And so things started to seemingly just feel so loose in my life, and felt like I had no direction and no guidance whatsoever. And because of that, my son, who was at that time when this started happening, 13 years old, and I did not have the bandwidth and to really nurture my daughter, who was 12 at the time, and my son 13. And so I lost some stuff in that relationship. And so those relationships started to go sour. And that's not a good age for to have your relationship with your children go sour. And so it just ended up being years. And I remember when I got to year seven of dealing with stuff that once it discombobulated, I just couldn't get it back together like it was. Because before then, life was good. Everything was neatly packaged, right? Everything felt like my fairy tale living, and I just could not put all those pieces back together. And I remember at 7 being so hopeful, because that's how many years Job suffered. So when I got to year 7, and mess was still unraveling, oh, baby, me and Jesus had a big talking to, right? It's like, okay, God, you're going to have to tell me something, because this here still going on year 7, 8, and 9. And so those moments can last a long time. It ended up being a full decade before things started to really settle down, and for me to feel like I had some real agency in my life again, right? And so those are the type of seasons we're talking about. Sometimes they last for a year or two. Sometimes they last a decade, right? And so we want to talk about what's the mindset, or what's the spirit set that we must carry into these seasons when we notice that we're, oh, because you don't really know it's going to be a season until you're like in it, like, oh, this is unrelenting. Okay, then what do you do in those times? Because what we do in those seasons will have a great impact on what happens in our lives down the road.
And you said something that was really interesting. And that's that when we're in this place where nothing is going our way, that can really be a moment of powerful transformation. And I'm like, I definitely want to know more about that, because I just remember just going through I don't even know I felt anything. You know what I'm saying? Because I was just that much on road. But again, I was like this, and it's just hard for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people who are watching this, right? How in the world can this be a powerful moment of transformation?
Right. So there are a couple of things that are really important. Would I have done some things different? Knowing what I know now, I would have done some things different than what I did them then. However, I did do a lot of things right in that moment. And so I'm thrilled to talk about that and to have this understanding that really 7X's have been in my heart for a long time, even way before it was written, right? Because it was important for me, one, to stay close to my spiritual source, even though I was pissed off at God, misunderstood. One thing this is a different story, and I don't want to drag us off into a spirituality context, but one of the things I've always been very clear about is that my God, at least, is big enough to handle my little twiddly emotions of doubt and insecurity. And I don't know, my God is big enough to handle all that. So I was never afraid of saying to God, I don't know, are you sure? I don't think you know what you're doing up there, because God ain't worried about my little feelings like that, right? My God, I know my God is bigger than that. And so I, because of that general faith and spirituality, I gave myself the room, the space, the safety to draw closer to God in doubt, not in belief, but in doubt. That for me was Q. I'm not going to sit up here and tell lies that, oh, I just held on in Jesus' hand. No, me and God had some serious talks like, you got to show me something, right? But it allowed me to drive myself toward a very core belief of mine in spirituality. And so I did that. And I came as I was, not as society or somebody told me I should be, and pray and get down on your knees and pray. You're like, no, I ain't praying today because I'm mad at you, God. You got to show me something else, right? Whatever that energy was, but giving myself permission to take that energy into my spiritual life is what allowed me to hold on to it. Now, whatever your life is, whatever it is you worship or believe in or grasp for, it's got to be big enough to hold you in your authentic self. If it only works for you to squeeze yourself into one more little box, then it's going to be more stressful for you, right? And so that was one of the things that I think I did that really helped sustain me. And so I was always reading passages, books, papers, articles on how to be a better me. I always knew that was the key, that whatever happened, that if this was going to continue to be my life, then how am I going to exist in this space of grief and loss and confusion and having my identities ripped apart as to what it meant to be a mother or a daughter or a sister or a wife, all those identities just drifted away. Then I was constantly trying to restore what it meant to be me, then what is left of my authentic self if all these things are going away? I was always real clear about that. And so it forced me to separate the roles that I was playing from who I was. And that was important.
So the spirituality aspect of it, and then just looking, just searching, like, okay, wait a minute, this is not who I want to be in this moment. This is not how I want to go through this. This is not because there's one person that the circumstances happen to, and then is there another person that manages this, not on rope, but actually manages.
Right. And when we say person, we're talking about persona, right? Like there's this person that this is happening to, and you're happening to. So that's the me. I'm mad, I'm angry. And then there's this person who desperately wants to grow and be the best person she can be. Right. And so those people have to, or personas are coexisting in those moments. If you give in to only one, the one that's angry, pissed off, in disbelief, whatever, then what do you have to come back to when the season is over? So you have to give yourself permission to just be however it is that you are in those moments. I think one of the things that make people less effective in these seasonings of their lives is that they are trying to get through them in some right way. Right. And I didn't know what that was. And I wasn't worried about trying to get through the season. I was worried about who am I in this moment, period. And however long this lasts, what kind of person am I going to be? Who am I in this moment? Because that wasn't always pretty. No lies detected. That was not always pretty. And for me to understand that it wasn't always pretty, I had to be conscious of it and aware of it while I'm in it.
Okay, but then how do you do that, right? Because sometimes we are all so in it. How do you even become aware? Are you dependent on, are you just taking cues from other people? Like, how do you even become aware when you're so entrenched in something?
So awareness, that's a good question. Awareness is a skill that we use all the time. It's a skill that we develop. And so we develop that skill with practice. So if I say, think of the color blue, you have the ability to do that without becoming the color blue, without having to go through 8 different transitions of the color blue. Your mind is just going to go to the color blue. You have the ability to hear me ask that question or give that request and create that thought at the same time. It's not that difficult. So sometimes we think that we're just the same person all the time. This is like, no, there are layers of awareness. We have access to those layers of awareness if we're willing to open ourselves up to that. And so we're not stuck in that. So in the same way that I can ask you about the color blue, to think about the color blue, and it happens, you just do it. I say, well, how did you become aware of the color blue? Well, because you asked me to. I have the ability to hear the question and create the thought at the same time. The same is true about our behavior. We have the ability to be in the behavior and watch it at the same time. We have that ability. We have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, or at least ask ourselves a question, right? At least like, okay, who was I at that moment?
Right.
And am I happy with my behavior in that moment?
Exactly. And if I'm not, then what is it that I am trying to become? if these moments are the moments that I'm going to have to live in, because I don't know how long this season is going to last, no one does. If this is the type of life that I'm subjected to, then what kind of person do I want to be in this life?
Oh, that really resonates with me. I'm just going to share a really brief story that happened to me on Friday, as a matter of fact. And I was talking about something, and the person really interpreted it as venting, and maybe it was venting, but it was a miscommunication. The whole point is that the person said to me, I can usually hold your venting, but I cannot hold it today.
Mm.
And I said to the person, I said, you know what? Thank you for telling me that, right? Thank you for telling me that, because that's good information. And you're absolutely right, right? I can't expect you to hold this, right? This goes back to what you said about when you were talking to God, because your God is big enough to hold that, right? A lot of the people that we like, that we get along with, that we friends with, that's family, yeah, some of the stuff they can't hold because they're dealing with their own stuff, right? They're dealing with their own stuff. But I'm going to tell you something, because I've been struggling with something for a long time that I'm not going to get into here. You are very aware of what that is. And it freed me, because I said to myself later, right? Because I had to do something immediately, like after that, right? But later, when I thought about it, I said, okay, this season has to be done for me. Because if I unconsciously am turning into or returning to being somebody who I was a few decades ago, who is constantly complaining or venting or whatever it is, that means I'm constantly angry, right? Frustrated, could turn into being bitter and resentful. And that's always an indication to me that, one, I'm not happy, right? But two, even bigger than that I am actually shrinking myself in order to be in order to remain in a particular place, in space.
Mm.
And I was like, every other signal that I have ignored, that it is time for me to leave, I cannot ignore this. I cannot ignore this one, right? Because this is dealing with who I am, who I want to be. And I don't want to be that. I don't want to go back down that road. Why return to something that I left, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry to take us off on that course, but that was really, really freeing. So it goes back to what you said, that awareness, like, okay, now that was an external one, right? Because somebody said, look, I can't hold this. And then I had to look at, if I'm always coming off, right? And that could also be that person's perspective too. But it's like, I got to look at this, and I got to pay attention to this, because I've been ignoring, because then it made me look at some other things that I was ignoring. Because I think one of the things, like we talked about, that out-of-body experience, that whole disassociation, it's easy to ignore that, because some of us, and I'm your queen, some of us have been out of our body for like many years, right? But that was really something. So yeah, thank you, thank you for that. Yeah, if somebody tells you something like that, really look at that. Don't even get mad. Thank that person, because that's some real information right there.
That's right. We always have to be appreciative of authenticity that comes from ourselves or other people. Okay?
Yeah. And, on top of that, I just wanted to just ask, because it might be related, how do past traumas play into our season?
Whew, yeah. So unhealed trauma, unhealed wounds can be triggered by an event. And I think they are always triggered by the physical loss of a physical presence of someone. And so, but other ways too. And also unhealed wounds can give us those personalities or characteristics whereby we create perpetual discomfort in our lives, which is very different than when life throws something at you. And so I want to make a slight distinction. So if you stand on a job for 20 years that makes you miserable, that's not life throwing stuff at you. And that's you in need of some healing so that you can make more empowered decisions, right? But when you get laid off from a 20-year job for no reason of your own, right? Or you get betrayed by your spouse who that you've been with for 5 years, have children with, a home and all this other stuff, and you find lumps in your body or things like that. Those are, life is throwing stuff at you that really you have little control over, no control over. You can't control the event, so you must be conscious about how you're going to control your response to it, right? So trauma can impact how you respond to those things, because the unhealed, any pain that comes up can be easily attached to the residual pain or the unhealed pain of the trauma. That makes it very difficult for you to respond in a way that make you feel seen, loved, appreciated, valued, worthy, all those things. Instead, they go back to the trauma where you may have felt none of those things, right? And so that's a big way that trauma will impact how you move through this season. So I want to talk a little bit, because that's related to about how do we move through these seasons, right? And so one, we must recognize the season as their own entities, as opposed to life hates you, right? So the loss of my brother had nothing to do with the loss of my nephew, who was my godson, and had nothing to do with the loss of my sister's husband, and had nothing to do with the issues that were coming out in my family. Those were separate things. And I know it feels like life hates you, right? That's not what's going on, but allow yourself to feel that. But in order to come out of this season, in order to come all the way through and out of this season, we must give ourselves some soft landings for each of those. I don't need to go back to heal about 3 deaths. I need to go back and heal my loss of my relationship with my brother. I need to heal that. That was a different loss from the loss of the responsibility that I felt toward my godson. That was different. But I can't distinguish that in the season. In the season, it all feels like my life is full of grief. No, your life gave you 3 separate events that you must go back and make room for to heal and address. You deserve that space, right? And the healing that you had done for, in this case, that I had done for my brother, I really had done for my brother. And now this healing that I needed to do for my nephew, my godson, was then needed to be addressed. But I had healed. Just because I got grief on top of that didn't mean that, oh my gosh, no, I can't heal for my brother. No, I had done that work. I get to hold space for that. So separating all the events that are happening and allowing ourselves room to grieve the person, maybe the person who supports me in the healing of my relationship, the loss of my brother, might be a different person than who I burdened with the loss of what's happening with my son, who's now gone astray, right, from my emotional absence. They may not be the same person that helps you through each of these events. So that's it. Again, when we allow ourselves to separate these events, we go where we need to get the support that we need, instead of trying to pick, oh no, Dr. Singleton, where were you when this happened? They were taking care of their own lives. You don't get to appoint who helps you through these things. It's not an appointment. You don't get to appoint your spouse or your best friend or no, you must do the work by really understanding what your needs are and going to the spaces that are ready to hold you and be that soft landing. If you insist that that's one person, then that season is going to be drawn out. So it's really, really important that you, even though it's a season, it's going to feel like a season, it's going to take you through the time. If you start to separate it, you can also find some soft moments between those seasonings. Maybe you found, or those seasons, maybe you found love. Maybe you found a new friend. Maybe you started to get in shape. Maybe you changed something significant. Maybe you went back to school. It wasn't a season where nothing went right. Some things did go right, but you couldn't feel that under the heaviness and the weight. That just couldn't, what was going right could never be your focus, because it was overshadowed by all the things that were going wrong. So, but when we step back and take a broader view of our lives during that season, we can pick up on some gratitude, and we can develop appreciation for who showed up, how they showed up, and give ourselves more grace in how we were handling that as well. So that's really important. And then the other piece about that is making sure that we clear the path and know when that season is over, that we do something to recognize and acknowledge that we are refilling our cup with agency, personal agency, so that we know definitively that this season is over, has ended. I'm creating something new. My cup runneth over again. I'm in full control of my life and my decisions, because if you don't recognize that, you run the risk of being on guard for the rest of your life, waiting for the next shoe to drop, right? Being tensed up, not really believing that this world is for you or good things are going to happen to you. So you must definitively acknowledge the end of a season so that you can recognize your full agency in your life again.
Wow, I think that is so powerful. You know what you said about do something to recognize that, because I think a lot of times we really get through something that's really just been so hard, so difficult, such a horrible season, and we just keep going. We just keep going like nothing happened, and there's no acknowledgement of, and I think sometimes, I mean, they correct me if I'm wrong, that when we reach another season, right? Because there's gonna be as long as you living, there's gonna be something, right? And I think when we don't acknowledge that, when we get to the next season, we're just like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Because we totally didn't do anything to
right
what we got through before.
The risk that we run is that if we don't come out of the season, is that it all feels like the same season. That's the risk that we run. We still feel like life is out to get us. Like you were saying, like, are we looking under the rock? Are we looking at, these people don't like, so we're still responding to the world with our hearts full of despair, right? Our minds looking for problems that we can't solve, our victim mode setting in, and going through life disempowered because we never recognize that the season came to an end.
Powerful. I just want to just ask this one question and tell me if this is a totally different podcast. But when a lot of people are going through a season, they anesthetize with something, whether it's drink, whether it's drugs, whether it's compulsive shopping, whether it's compulsive eating, whatever, there's a lot of stuff that people use. How does that impact your growth during that season? Do you grow with that? Can you anesthetize and grow at the same time?
Again, I think it depends on what you're dulling the pain with, right? What are you dulling it with? So if it's creating a dependency on a chemical, then the obvious answer is no, right? But if it, for example, if you're anesthetizing by strengthening your relationship with your spouse or your friend group or you're volunteering because that makes you feel good, you can find some growth in that as long as you're willing not to create a unhealthy dependency on those things either, right? So there are things, and that's why I was saying to you earlier in my season was that it was so important for me to ask myself, what kind of person do you want to be? If you leave it to this season to determine who you are, then the season's not going to end. Even if it ends, it's not going to end, right? Because you're too busy numbing to even know when the season ends, right? And so if we ask ourselves, who do I want to be? And when I say I want to be A, B, and C, and this is why the 7 X's is so important, because it's not for a moment, it's a life that we choose. If I say I want to be a kind person, I can't mean that I want to be a kind person on the days that everything goes right for me. And on the days that things don't go right for me, then I'm just going to be a crappy person. I'm going to take it out on everybody. Well, then that's not who you want to be. And so when I check in with myself and consciously choose, who do I want to be? And whoever I say I want to be, how does that being get reflected in this horrible season?
Wow. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah. So just for us to just recap here, because this has been a lot. Yeah, no, listen, hit the replay, hit the replay, hit the replay.